If you're looking to qualify as a lawyer in the UK, then you need either a training contract to be a solicitor or you need pupillage to be a barrister. Both of these are offered through the Legal Trainee Scheme to work for government departments. Last year, I applied for pupillage with the Crown Prosecution Service. I got to the interview stage and I got rejected. This year, I reapplied, went through all the stages and secured pupillage to start next year. So in this video, I want to walk you through the lessons I learned along the way and what is going to make the difference for you when you come to apply. Guys, it's nice to have you back on the channel. If you're new here, my name's Taz and I'm a future trial lawyer based in the UK. I know it's been a minute, I literally almost forgot to actually wear my glasses today. It's been that long since I've produced a video, so apologies for that. But look, we're back with a banger today. What I want to say before we start is that resources I'm going to refer to in this video, I'm going to put on my website, and these are the documents that I prepared for the video stage interview and the final interview. Let's look at the actual application process itself for the Legal Trainee Scheme. It's a 4-stage process. The first stage is your application form and your CV. Then the next stage is the online test, the civil service judgment test and verbal reasoning test. If you succeed in both of those tests, you're invited back to video interview. And then the final stage of the process, if you succeed at video interview, is the final face-to-face interview, which includes some type of an assessment and questions. The focus of this video today is going to be on stage 3 and stage 4, which is the video interview and final interview, and that's because from the people that I've spoke to, what they struggle with the most is these 2 stages. If we try to cover CVs and the civil service test in this video, we'd be here all day, so I'm just going to cover them in a later video. Also, let me say this from the outset, and this is super important, that the Legal Trainee Scheme isn't just for aspiring criminal lawyers. If you've got an interest in civil or commercial, there are different government departments which offer this scheme. One is the Government Legal Department for the civil route. Now, why this scheme should be on your radar if it's not already is this. The majority, if you're applying for pupillage, you'll know the majority of self-employed chambers offer normally 1 to 2 pupillages. Some offer 8 or 10, but they are the extreme minority. This year, when I applied to this scheme, it said in the application process that we are offering 80 positions. Between those applying for training contracts and pupillages, they'll give the best applications the slots. And now, if you're looking to qualify in the UK as a lawyer, you should take this extremely seriously because you're comparing 80 slots per application against 1 or 2. The application process is marked using what they call the Success Profiles Framework. Now, this moves away from the traditional way of assessing candidates, which is purely based on competency. This looks at several things. I'm going to include the actual matrix up here for you to have a look at, but it is really important to get familiar with this before you apply because you need to understand how you're going to be assessed during the process. There are 5 components to the profile: experience, strengths, ability, technical ability, and behaviours. And I'm going to briefly touch on them, but really the emphasis needs to be on you having looked at what the behaviours are and what the strengths are, because these are really thoroughly assessed at the video interview stage and the final interview. For pupillage, the main behaviours are delivering at pace, making effective decisions, communicating and influencing, and seeing the bigger picture. I'm going to include some of the definitions up here, and make sure you actually look at the document itself because the definitions are much more detailed than these brief ones that they've included. Next is the strengths. This is the second most important thing that you need to prepare. The rest of the profiles, the ability, the technical things, these are kind of things you either have or you don't. You either have the ability or you don't. You either have the technical skills or you don't. But the strengths and the behaviours, these are things that you can prepare. So with that said, in terms of the strengths, I'm going to include it up here, but just learn, there's a definition section. They map the strengths onto behaviours, and basically if you look at what the definitions are, like adaptable for each of these strengths, you can then devise a way that you can evidence these at interview. Ability will be assessed through the online verbal reasoning and judgment tests. Technical skills, if you're applying for pupillage, will look at your oral ability or advocacy ability and potentially some type of a written exercise. And your experience is assessed through your application form and your CV. Okay, let's get into the meat of this. Let's start off with the video interview. How I'm going to talk about this is I'm going to look at the structure of the interview itself, then I'm going to give you some tips for performing well, and then we're going to look at the most likely, not definite, but possible questions that have a tendency to come up through my own research and looking into the scheme, and things that I experienced did come up on the second time when I came to apply. For the video interview, you're going to be asked a practice question, and then you're going to be asked 3 questions, which are separate. The first question, after the practice question, you'll be given 5 minutes to prepare, and then you'll have 2 minutes to deliver. For the other 2 questions, you're given 1 minute to prepare and 1 minute 30 to deliver. That was what it was during my time doing it. So, with that said, how this is going to look, the question will pop up on the screen, you'll do your preparation, and then it will time you in 3, 2, 1, and you're recording and you go. I had a mare when I came to apply. Why? Because basically you can finish your answer early. So let's say you have 2 minutes to deliver. You don't have to use the whole 2 minutes. You can do 1 minute 50, click finish, and then you move on to the next question. When I was doing it, I clicked finish and I skipped a question. So I went from question 1 to question 3. I was like, I pretty much bombed the interview. So don't let that happen to you. Learn from my pain. Now let's talk practical tips for when you're actually performing on the video interview. If you haven't done it before, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking being on camera if you're not used to it. So I would recommend potentially go on Zoom or something like that and record yourself speaking into a camera. That's the first thing. You don't want the first time you speak into a camera to be on the video interview. The next thing to say is, when you are given the time to prepare, let's say you're given 2 minutes for the first question, use that time to structure an answer, which has a beginning, a middle, and an end, or however you want to do it. 3 main points that you're going to say, but there should be something on paper that you can see, you know what you need to deliver, and then you use the time you have to make that delivery. Once you've got your points down and you've structured your response, what you're going to deliver in the video interview, use the remaining time. Let's say you've got 30 seconds left. Practice in the camera, say it out loud, run through it once, twice, 3 times. That repetition will streamline your delivery when you're actually going for it in the real thing. 2 major points: don't run out of time. Like, don't structure something which is just such a lengthy response. It's better to finish early than overrun. If you're applying for pupillage, don't forget the advocacy skills that you've learned along the way. As promised, we're going to look at some of the key questions that you really should consider or have an answer to before you go to the video interview. The first, most obvious, is if you're applying for the Crown Prosecution Service, why do you want to work for the Crown Prosecution Service? Things that you might consider are your interest in criminal law. What can you get from the Crown Prosecution Service that you can't get somewhere else? Maybe consider the fact that you'd be working at the employed bar, not at the self-employed bar. So why do you want to work at the employed bar? All these things will be important to consider in delivering your answer. Another question, which is kind of an obvious question if you're applying for the Crown Prosecution Service to be a Crown Prosecutor, the question is, well, why do you want to be a Crown Prosecutor? And in answering this question, it's important to remember that this is a civil service role. So where does your interest in civil service come from? Can you demonstrate that through any experience that you've done? These are important elements to consider when thinking about this question. Another question might be, why the Legal Trainee Scheme? What do you know about it? What is it that attracts you to this scheme over other schemes or other opportunities? The last 2 questions, one might come up asking you to demonstrate a skill relevant to the role that you're applying for. So for pupillage, for example, your role as an advocate is to communicate information. They might say, well, give us an example of how, if you're presented with loads of information, do you go about organising that information and communicating it effectively? Finally, a question I've seen come up on numerous occasions is they'll give you a statement such as, I am committed to my continuous personal development, or my CPD, and for you to give an answer explaining why you agree with this statement. Do not forget the STAR method, which is situation, task, action, response. This really doesn't even matter if you're applying for a training contract, pupillage, any interview that you go to, you should be familiar with this process as to how you evidence the skills which they are asking you to elicit. STAR is everything in the job interview game, so make sure you're comfortable with it. The final thing to mention is that I recall on both times I applied, they presented me with questions where below each of the questions there were bullet points, 1, 2, 3 bullet points that basically they're asking you to elaborate on specific things when delivering your answer. So when structuring your answer in the time that you have before you deliver it, make sure you jot down something for each of those bullet points so that you address them when you're delivering your response. Okay, so let's say you've succeeded in the CV, you've done the test, you've just completed the video interview, and you've been invited back to the final interview. congratulations. I'm going to try and now walk you through what might come up, how it's going to be structured, and how to go about preparing to give yourself the best chance at getting this over the line. The final interview itself will be comprised of 2 stages, an assessment stage and then a questions stage. And both of these will look to assess on the successor's profile the behaviours and the strengths. Once you go through the video interview stage, you'll get an email which will say, congratulations, you've gone through to the final stage. We're going to email you around about 5 days before your final interview, and we're going to give you a topic to research for your final interview. Now, your final interview may be in person, it may be online like mine was over Zoom or over Microsoft Teams, I think it was. But to take you through this process, I think it would be helpful if I use myself as an example. What happened when I got the email, what question was I given, and how did I go about preparing? 5 days before the interview, as promised, I was sent an email with the research topic in, and the research topic I was given was, please research the criminal offences relating to hate crimes and considerations for their potential reform. You need not consider football-related offences under the Football Offences Act 1991. So that was the research topic. Still, at this point, I've got the research topic. Okay, I don't know how the assessment is going to present itself. What format is the assessment going to take? With that being said, through my research, I made the decision that this is going to come up in one of 2 ways. It's going to come up as a charging decision, which is where you're given a case file with evidence and you are asked to consider a certain charge like assault. So you'll review the evidence as to whether or not the CPS should charge this for assault using the full code test and the code for Crown prosecutors to guide your decision. That being said, you need to really, if you haven't already, be very familiar with the code for Crown prosecutors throughout this entire process. That was one way it could come up. Now, the other way I structured the research was an academic essay question. I had 2 research documents, one simply for the charging exercise and the other outline of how the legislation works, how it was structured, what were the controversies around the legislation, why am I being asked this question? Going into the final assessment, I was convinced that the charging exercise was going to come up. Sod's law, it didn't. Instead, they asked me to draft up a written response to the following legal question. If existing hate crime laws are fit for modern society and the extent to which any reform is needed. You'll have 30 minutes to prepare your response. This response will be given to the panel, and then I had 8 minutes to deliver a presentation on this. After the presentation, you're asked questions on the presentation you've just delivered, and they're looking to see what your response is, how you deal under pressure, how you think on your feet, and then once that part, the assessment part of the interview is concluded, you go into the interview questions section, which are competency-based questions designed to elicit the behaviours which we've referred to and strengths. At the end of the interview, I was asked if I had any questions about the role or just general questions I wanted to know, and then the interview was concluded. Let's talk about tips for preparation. Okay, the first thing you want to do is prepare 2 tables. The first table has 3 columns. In the first column is going to be the behaviour, the second column is going to be the experience, and then the third column is going to be an outlined example using the STAR method of how you evidence this behaviour. And basically the second table is exactly like the first table, except you're swapping out the behaviour for strength. So it will be strength, experience, and then a starred example in the third column. In terms of the legal research for whatever topic is you're given, these are the tips that I would highly recommend. Visit the CPS website. Whatever the topic is, the CPS will cover this on their website, this area of law. So they're the best place to get the information from. But after you've looked on their website, you don't have to do all the heavy lifting yourself. See if someone's already done the heavy lifting. Go on different sites, see what is available for this topic which you're being asked. For example, my topic was covered in a government paper which beautifully outlined the hate crime legislation in a really nice way and really discussed, it was like a 250-page document, but it discussed what the controversies were around this topic and what the government were already considering for the reform. Once my interview was concluded, I got sent a feedback document, or the marking criteria on which I was assessed. I'm going to include the behaviour section to that for the final interview up here. So what behaviours came up in the presentation and then what behaviours were being assessed in the actual interview section, and these were graded between 1 and 7. And then I'm also quickly going to outline what Strengths were assessed at the final interview. Look at the definitions, but it was catalyst, serviced, focused, and explainer, and these were graded between 1 and 4. If you're applying for the Legal Trainee Scheme this year, good luck. And other than that, guys, you know what it is. I'll see you at the next one.